assumption thing is huge. Never assume what's happening. Always ask questions and dive a bit deeper. That calorie deficit is, the principle. It's the end, I guess, result, right? But you've got the other components such as nutrition, training, activity. Those are part of that equation. And there's so many different ways that you can, do the maths to get to that end equation. As they progress through, the process and they get closer towards, the mid to the end result, I might start asking them the question back. It's a really fine line between, I'm trying to think, ahead of time and say, okay, let's not push too hard so you get burnt out or whatever. But at the same time, sometimes that initial acceleration is really key to get the thing moving, right?
Just quickly before we get into the full show, for any of you who's watched this podcast before, you will know that I am super passionate about this podcast and getting on the most interesting guests to help you get better results with your fat loss, your business, your life, and your coaching skills. But at the moment, 85% of you who watch this channel aren't subscribed to the channel. The bigger the channel gets, the better the guests get, the more high production value the show gets, as well as the clips get. So if you're watching this, please, can you click subscribe, like, comment, improve interaction so YouTube know we are a channel to be reckoned with. And then we can take over, and then I'm coming for you, Joe Rogan. So welcome to the show. I was just saying before we came on air that I remember watching, was the JPS sort of seminar series, if I got the company right? Where you did a webinar on sort of like goal setting and how to get results with the general population. And I thought to myself, there was so much stuff that no one talks about in favor of moment arms, joint angles, resistance profiles, and carnivore dieting. And I feel like while we both love all that stuff, we're both on the same call with Michael and Integra, I think it was good to delve into what is it that gets trainers producing consistent results and why some don't. So before we go into that, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about who him is and what's his background in the industry.
I've been a coach for, I think, close to like 9 years now. And only, I guess, the last 2 to 3 years, I've been working solely online. So prior to that, it's always been gym floor based. It's always been body transformations. That's been the goal, and just getting client results. And I guess like on a personal athletic endeavor, I've been competing in powerlifting for many years, represented GB, and since 2015, I guess that was my last competition. So you could say I'm kind of semi-retired from that, but since then I've been pursuing bodybuilding. Not as good as a powerlifter as I am a bodybuilder, but or the other way around. Sorry, but yeah, it's
you're being mega humble there, right? Like I still have trouble saying off season when I'm doing, because I've never ever stepped on a bodybuilding stage, right? I can get show lean, but it's just a photo shoot, so I find it hard to do that. You at least competed in something genuinely, so I think that's still super impressive. But like, sort of going to like that, like you said, it was always body composition that was the thing you worked in. Like, what made it? I suppose there's most of the clientele of body composition. But what made you go down the body composition route rather than strength and performance route, considering your background?
I think it was more just for the masses, really. I think we can still work in terms of the strength, performance side of things, even still whilst doing body composition. We don't have to be exclusive on that, right? Like that's still a secondary goal for a lot of people. But when it comes to body composition, I think that is something that everybody wants to some degree. Everybody wants strength as well, but it's what people say initially, but really what they want is the body composition side. So it wasn't so much of a focus solely on body composition. It was more so developing my knowledge more so on that. And I felt that was where, I lacked the knowledge when I first started. A lot of it was like strength based, like I had a very good background athletically in that. But yeah, you got to give people what they want, right?
So where did you start with this? You were saying that like that's the things you lacked in terms of knowledge, and now like if anyone goes to find you after this, if they don't follow you already, you can see
tons of absolutely amazing photo shoots, pictures and transformations with your clients. Like, what was the journey from being, this is what I lack, to being able to produce results pretty consistently?
Yeah, so when I first started, I was working at like a commercial gym called Lifestyle Fitness, and actually, very very quickly, I was humbled by that experience. Like, just come out of uni, and I think like many personal trainers, I had this envision that I would just be able to coach clients, get clients very easily, but a lot of the work in getting clients is walking the gym floor and doing sales, right? And that really shocked me, and that took a lot of the love out for me. And I think within the first kind of 3 months, I was ready to kind of quit, if I'm honest, because that was something that no one had taught me before. So outside of that, that kind of rough start, it was then realizing when I was giving clients nutrition, etc., I didn't really know too much about calories. I didn't really know too much about. Okay, I knew that they needed to eat a certain way and eat clean, for example, but there wasn't too much stuff in terms of like calorie, information that was out there at the time, and I found it difficult, to get initial transformations with people. And I think I went through that whole process like everybody else, didn't know how to create that energy deficit. It was just all about, eating clean. You have to eat these kind of foods because that was the kind of way that I did it. And it seems funny now speaking about it because there's so much information. Like the information that I got before, there wasn't even many podcasts out then. Yeah. Like 10 years ago, it was the magazines, etc. It was coming to the end of it, but that was the things that I was watching, and it was difficult to get that, information. And I think once you get into the right circle, I guess, once you find like the right person, then you follow their sources. You eventually, surround yourself with, the correct information. And yeah.
I remember I worked for a Virgin Active as my first job, and like you, I wasn't prepared for that sort of like walking around and chatting to people on the gym floor. It seems very fake and unorganic. Sure, the person on a treadmill with the headphones in and asking about personal training, like they clearly want you to fuck off. And I remember doing 3 jobs to try and make ends meet because I could get a few clients, but I wasn't a salesman. And then I worked at doors on a nightclub, and then I was doing on the weekends doing butlering for Hindus. If anyone in the Western world will probably know what kind of butlering I'm meaning, unfortunately. And coming back around to sort of like do the whole thing again at 5 o'clock the next morning. But I feel like I resonate a lot with your story based off the fact that I remember I read the book called The Dark Side of Fat Loss by Sean Croxton. Still today, one of my favorite books on nutrition, but it was very paleo, hormones. And that was sort of the way of the industry when I first started. And that was the same for you, but it was like Charles Poliquin and Biosig. It was very hormone-related stuff. And I couldn't understand why my clients weren't getting in shape. And it's probably because they were eating their body weight in nuts. And I had no idea because it was clean. And I did that for so long. And then now the industry sort of flipped on its head where it's almost a bit too simplistic. Every coach in the world just goes, you just got to be in a calorie deficit. I'm like, well, have you ever thought about telling your clients how to do that?
Yeah. That nut thing is so true, right? Everyone was like, yeah, just have nuts, as a snack. And it's like, yeah, I'm just not going to back like 1,000 calories worth of snacking.
They're protein, right? I mean, that's all it is. Like, that's my favorite protein source. I had an episode with Rob, who's my regular guest host. We talked about like things that grind our gears in the fitness industry, the episode that came out today. And we spoke about like coaches doing protein hack videos. And it's like they've never ever been down a meat aisle in their life. It's like yogurts and protein bars and nuts. And I'm just like, what clients do you get that they never have a chicken breast?
None.
Yeah. So what was that person for you? What was that, like you said, finding that right person? What was that person for you that helps you kind of like start to put the pieces together?
Do you know what? That I actually encountered that person a long time ago, but he wasn't really, I don't know. He taught me stuff at uni. So that Martin McDonald, he lectured
Oh, yeah.
me. This was before MNU. He lectured at my university, and he taught me nutrition. So that definitely helped. But it was very like, I wouldn't say surface level, but it wasn't like body transformation focused.
Yeah.
It was more like these are proteins, these are carbohydrates, but there wasn't. Maybe that was me not listening as much at uni, but
That was my uni experience. I managed to get a third at uni because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I just sort of like drank 3 years away. And 3 years of my life I barely remember.
yeah, but he was a really good start. And then eventually I did meet Phil Lerney. So he used to be a part of. He's actually who got me started in the fitness industry.
Me too.
And he was training at a gym that I still train at today called Genesis Gym. And he was doing powerlifting at the time. So he was part of the British powerlifting team that was there. And that's kind of how I got to know him. But I remember him distinctly speaking to one of the members of staff regarding, dropping body fat. And that's when I knew, and I was listening, and that's when I knew, like, this is what I really want to do. I guess he was probably the first person, as well as Martin. And then over time, I started to look at more resources from who he was quoting, people like Paula Quinn. It kind of all stemmed off from there, I guess.
Looking back now, there's like a lot of coaches that are going into this industry and they're almost going it alone. It's like the trend now to be self-employed and be an online coach and work from a beach in Bali with some Wi-Fi connection that somehow magically exists there. But like, having gone through this process, and we've both worked in a big facility, we've both worked in UP, like, do you think there's a lot of value in working for a company where your sole focus is getting client results and being in an environment of people that are driven to get client results? Do you still think there's value in that now? Or do you think there's enough education that it's easier for people to find out than we had that liberty?
That's very difficult to say because obviously I've gone through that process. I'm going to have a big bias towards that. The experience that I got from it, because and probably very similar from you at Virgin Active, when you are at that commercial gym and you have to pace that gym floor. And I had this, I don't know, this crazy thought or ego that people, like, I don't need to like beg for people to beg or do sales to get clients. People should just want to train with me, right? It's like they don't know you for whoever, right? But I generally think that because you're spending a lot of time focused on trying to get clients, you're not focused as much on improving, your craft of getting results and working with the client itself. Like, getting results isn't just you learn stuff and you get there and you get those results kind of thing. It takes time for you to nurture and develop, people skills, social skills, how to get someone to stick to the diet or stick to training who doesn't enjoy it. Those skills you don't learn on a course or anywhere. You learn that through experience. And I feel like a lot of people potentially miss out on those things by not working on the gym floor and not working with enough people. And places like UP, places like the only one I can think of other than that is M10 in the UK, that they give you these clients and they allow you to do the thing that you want to do or you set out to do in the first place, and give you a home to really nurture your skills. And that's really what I got out of personal training and working at UP.
Do you think that people now going straight into online are doing themselves a disservice and making it harder for themselves, or do you think they're kind of different skill sets? I kind of see both sides of this.
I do think that they are slightly different skill sets, because even with me going from face-to-face PT and then switching into online, there was still a little bit of a learning curve. I think the communication side is definitely needs to be a lot larger in the online context, and it's difficult to. You really need to speak to your client consistently, because you simply cannot sense tone as well across an email or maybe across just a check-in feedback form. I like to speak to people on WhatsApp, maybe have calls with them initially. So then you're actually speaking to the individual. You can see body language, you can see emotions. That makes a huge difference when you're trying to get the information that you want from the client itself.
Yeah, and I think it's different, but I think the one-to-one certainly taught me that you need, like, how important it is to have good communication skills, and told me how to do them. Like, I don't think I couldn't build the social skills I did if I did everything via Zoom, and I never had that social interaction. I never spoke to enough people to sense tone and subtext and reading between the lines. And when people say they're having a good week, but you see it in their face, they're not. And that sort of stuff is really hard when you're not in person. And like, I also think one of the things that's really important is to be able to teach people how to train. I think that's really impossible when you're never ever been on the gym floor. Like, I wouldn't say we just get it, because I certainly still do not get it. But I've done this for long enough now that I know enough about it to sort of stuff that's second nature to me. I can't assume that's second nature to everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, when you can see people moving, you realize actually probably a lot of people aren't ready to squat or deadlift straight away. And perhaps if you're doing it in terms of an online context, especially if people are not sending you videos, which, let's face it, is actually really difficult to get a clean video from somebody. Not everybody is confident enough in the gym to just go, hey, I'm going to lean my phone against here and record my set for you.
Do you think it's the hardest thing to get? Like, I generally think sometimes that you can get people to send you a check-in photo in their underwear, no problem whatsoever. But if you want a video of their split squat, you'll be asking for weeks and you'll never get one. I never understood why that is so much harder. Maybe it's just because people don't like being that guy.
It is difficult, I think. It probably is one of the most difficult things. But typically I find, I've done transformations where, I haven't seen a training video from somebody at all. And you're just going off, feedback from them. And the occasional, I might meet them up and train with them. But sometimes with online coaching, you are trying to do the best with what you're given. Yeah. And a lot of the times it is, coaching blindly.
So what do you think is helped you now? Like, looking, like, going from where you were, bringing yourself back to where you are now, what do you think is the things that help you, do you think are the most important for getting consistent client results?
I think one of the biggest things that has helped me is just understanding the clients more. I guess having the empathy, I think, is really key. So one of the things that Michael always says is that, think science, but speak client, right? And I think what that the client says out of their mouth, it may not necessarily be exactly what they mean. I think a lot of people do struggle to explain themselves in the full extent. And that's where, as a coach, you need to kind of pick up on that and keep, asking questions, keep following up, almost like, why is that? Why is that? And just keep breaking down the barriers until you find out what the overall answer or question actually is.
I think that's so important. And when we look at, like, a good mutual friend of ours, Nathan Johnson, right? He talks a lot about you ask good questions, you get good answers. And I find now with mentoring lots of coaches that a lot of coaches struggle to ask sometimes the most obvious of questions. I look at coaches a lot where they're going, so they're struggling to get the step count up, or they're struggling to have their activity, and they've tried all these solutions. And I go, have you asked them why they're struggling to hit the step count? And they're like, no. And sometimes, like, people don't even ask, like, what is it that you're struggling with? Coaches like to assume, right, this is probably a good idea, we're going to try this. I'm like, well, if someone's got really time poor and you just said, well, let's try doing 3 hours of cardio today, they're not going to have a chance. And one of the things I've done, using steps as an example, is like with my mentees and coaches, is just like, right, let's look at steps as a unit of time rather than a number of steps. If it takes you 7 minutes to hit 1,000 steps, then you can match a strategy to the client's day. On a Sunday where they're tired and they want to sit and watch Netflix all day and watch Dharma till it finishes, do an hour of cardio a day, you hit 8,000 steps, and then just come back and put your feet up. But on a day where you're busy in the office, maybe you get up every 10 minutes and do every hour and do a 5-minute walk. And that's helped me. Finding things like that has helped me get more empathy with my clients and go, right, let's meet them where they're at. We know what the non-negotiables are, but it's not as simple as you said as calorie deficit and progressive overload. What are the strategies to get to that calorie deficit? For one client, it may be different to another.
Absolutely. I think that assumption thing is huge. Never assume what's happening. Always ask questions and dive a bit deeper. And I always see, that calorie deficit is, the principle. It's the end, I guess, result, right? But you've got the other components such as nutrition, training, activity. Those are part of that equation. And there's so many different ways that you can, do the maths to get to that end equation. It's about, finessing it to that individual.
Yes.
That's really, really key.
So for people, if there's coaches watching this that are like, right, I don't know if my question skills are very good. When you're asking questions for your clients and you've got some level of data in front of you, or maybe not, if they've not given you everything you need to know, is there certain things that you would do when it comes to asking questions? Is there certain particular guidelines you follow with a good question?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I think because of that experience I've had in the past, it kind of does come a bit more naturally to me. And I think you have a rough guess in terms of what the solution can be, but you need to diagnose it for sure, right? So you need to say, okay, well, if this person's saying that, for example, I can't do my steps, or, okay, why can't you do your steps? And they might give, what seems like an excuse, but then you say, okay, cool. So, what is the reason behind that? And then what is the reason behind that? What is the reason behind that? And you've got to keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper until you find out that it's probably down to the weather.
Yeah. It's almost like a unicorn to find a client that doesn't give excuses, right? The old personal trainer adage is that person doesn't want it enough, or they're not committed enough. And while there are clients you do get and you're going you just like the idea of being lean, but in general, most people have given excuses their entire life of why they can't do this. So to come to you and pay the money and expect their whole life's going to turn around and they're just going to commit to everything without automatically going into excuse mode is borderline impossible. And I think our job is to minimize those excuses. I remember, you'll know Adam Haley, right? And I used to work with Adam when he was at City. And I remember a great bit where a client came into him and he goes, "How was your weekend?" "Yeah, fine." He was like, "What do you mean fine? That wasn't a confident answer." And he was like, "Well, I went to the cinema." Okay, and he goes, "And they wanted to eat out. And there was only a pizza place." Because it was only a pizza place. Yeah, I had to have pizza. And he was like, "Could you tell me the pizza place that you the cinema you went to?" He went, "I've been to that cinema." Googled it. It's like, you've got a Nando's, you've got a salad bar, you've got all this sort of stuff. And that was maybe a little bit more honest and brutal than you would maybe give to your clients. But it's like, how do we take away their excuses to sort of mean that next time they go into that same situation, they're a bit more educated in what they can do. And two, they know they can't come back to you with the weather was shit. You can walk on the spot, you can put a dance video on, you can walk around your flat, you could go to a shopping center, you can go and drive to the gym and do some cardio. That excuse has gone away. And every time you limit one of those, you get to the point where you just have to do what they said they were going to do. One that I always do with steps is like, I go, "Oh, I've got no time, I'm really busy." And I go, "Okay, can I ask how much time you spend answering emails?" I go, "Oh, 2-3 hours a day." He goes, "Cool, do you have an email thing on your phone?" And I go, "Yeah, I have an email app on my phone." "Fantastic. What I want you to do is I want you to get up every hour and just walk for 10 minutes, answer your emails, come back and do 50 minutes deep work." You can't say no to it now because I've teed them up all the way through to give me exactly the answer I want. Is there ever a point where you would ask a more closed question, or nearly all the questions you ask more open-ended questions to get more elaboration?
I think that, there's always going to be some closed-ended questions. Like, if we're looking at, specific pain management or enjoyment things, like, do you like this, yes or no, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's going to be, some of those. But I think I like to have open-ended question because it gives people the chance to, speak a little bit more. And it's I almost get shocked when people don't, when you give an open-ended question and they just answer with, one straight thing. That's your chance to be like, okay, cool. Now we need to ask more questions, because if you generally give an open-ended question, usually people give, a lot of context, a lot of detail, and that gives you a chance to work with, more things and maybe ask and branch off and be a little bit more specific. But if, they're just being, one-word answers or very short, sharp answers, you're going to really struggle to be able to help a person, in my opinion.
I think that's really important. And also, I think that's where you reading between the lines with experience is vital, right? Like, some person gets a one-worded answer, might just think that person isn't talkative. Whereas I sat there and looking like, there's a reason you're not given a long answer. It's like, when you were working, UP is probably the best example, right? You have measurement day. And you go, cool, like, Steve, it's measurement day. And you go, can we do it Thursday? The first response, like, come on, what did you eat? Because no one is absolutely nailed their diet and the training, comes in on Monday and goes, I'm not feeling measurements today. They're going to want to show off and brag. And when check-ins become one-word answers, I'm always thinking, there's something you're not telling me here. Because if you really had a great week, you're going to open up and tell me all the good things you've done and what to say, trying to impress. And I think that's something that's super important. Go on, Ethan.
I was just going to say, like, sometimes it's on us as well, to create that environment that allows the client to be able to, speak and say what they want to say as well. I think sometimes, especially initially when you first have a client, maybe they've had a coach before who's, always been, telling them off or shouting at them or whatever, right? And been a bit more of a, like a Caesar kind of individual. And I think if you create that environment that this is safe, they are going to feel confident, right, to speak to you. And I guess sometimes it takes, a few times to break down that barrier, right, and make it easier for them to speak to you. You got to put your client in a position where they know that you've got their back and you have their best interest at heart. And you're not just there to kind of shout at them. You're looking to create a solution for them and help them and work together with them on their goals. Yeah. And once they feel that, generally people will start to open up. And that may take a little bit more time with certain people, depending on how much you can communicate with them and what the type of individual is. But I think from a lot of people, you should be able to get into that position. And if you can't get the result, I think a lot of the time is maybe as a coach, we failed to communicate on that level with them.
I think that's a super important point in terms of like bringing the client into the process. I remember I read a book called The Coaching Habit, which is generally one of my favorite books ever. And it's exactly that. It's like, how can you bring that person into the coaching journey? And now in every instance I do that, if I make adjustments, it's like, cool, we could do option A or option B. Which one works best for you? If they're not on track, it's never, hey, why are you not losing weight? It's like, look, you set these targets at the start and we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z. We're a little bit behind this target. And I think it's because of this. What could you do to bring this close to the target? Or do we need to refine the goal? There's always a get out card, but most clients are not going to go, yeah, I really hate this. I'm not going to do it. Can I stop it? Most of them are going to go, yeah, okay, I'm going to, tidy my shit up. And I think the more you can bring that person into a process. I had Andrew Coates on the podcast just over a year ago, and he always used to speak about, if this was a Harry Potter story, your client is Harry, you are Dumbledore. You're guiding them on their journey. And I love that analogy, and it's something I always kind of like bring back into that place. You mentioned creating that environment for somebody. And one of the things for example, one of the things I would do in those situations early on is when I get initial food diaries, I'm looking over food pictures, I'm looking for accuracy over perfection. So if someone had a glass of wine and some nuts, I wouldn't tell them off for like having a glass of wine and a few too many calories of nuts, but I would point out 0.3 glasses of wine on my Fitness Pal, 1 ounces of steak in my Fitness Pal, 13 and a half nuts, because I knew full well that I'm not cracking a nut in half and putting it in there. You just put a handful in and then straight there. So if I can encourage, like, I don't mind what food you have, but if you're honest and open with me, we can make things work for you. With online, though, it's a little bit more tricky because you can't have that conversation with them and look back over their diary if they've not been filling in their data. So how do you structure a check-in? Because your check-in is probably the cornerstone of what helps encourage them to speak to you for the rest of the week. How do you structure your check-ins to encourage that good communication with your clients? Is there a way you always do them, or does it depend on the person?
I think the check-in is probably not the best place to do that. I think it's the communications outside leading up to that check-in, which is why maybe the first check-in isn't always the best one. And, you know, that whole time that they've started and in between that gap of, you know, let's say if you're doing weekly check-ins, right? Those 6 days prior to that, you may be communicating with your client every single day. They may be asking you questions, you're responding. The way that you're responding to that person is going to play a huge amount in terms of how they're going to feed back to you at the end of the week, right? And, you know, if they're speaking to you and they're telling you, oh, you know, I've been doing this, I've been having these socials, then you need to help them to manage those things, right? You need to speak to them openly and say, look, it's okay to do this or it's okay to do that. And I think, yeah, it all comes down to the communications outside of the check-ins. And then finally, when the check-in does come back, there's going to be a time where you probably will need to, you know, have that hard conversation with your client, right? I think everybody has that throughout their journey, but it doesn't have to be a weekly thing. And I think it's not so much about what you're saying to the individual. It's more about how you're delivering that to that person, what experience that they can get them. Because you could say the same thing to the same person, but if you say it in a different way, you can get a different result out of it. You can get them to either take action or get them to really dislike you and be like, you know, you really, you know, made me feel bad in that situation. But you can say the same thing. So the way that you say it, I think is crucial. And we have to, when you're working in an online context, because they can't sense your tone, you almost have to be very, very careful with the words and the way that you write things, especially if it's just over WhatsApp. If you're over voice note, maybe it can be a little bit easier. If you're doing a Loom video, again, it's going to be slightly easier as well. But definitely, you know, initially, sometimes most of the communication probably is going to be via either a text message or via email, something like that. And the words that you pick and choose to use and the way that you structure your sentence, I think is very, very important to get your client to do the thing that you potentially want them to do.
When it comes to those touch points in between sort of check-ins, it's always something that, especially me with ADHD, has always had a hard time finding a bit of a balance with. You know, how often do you recommend keeping in touch with your clients if you really want them to get results?
I think this one's a tricky one. Like, I wouldn't be like really stush with your time. Like, you know, be out there to help the individual. And I think it's just about however much communication that client needs to help them get to the end goal. You know, some people are going to need more help and support. Other people, you know, you might start with giving them lots of support because they struggle, but then when they get into the flow, sometimes you can back off a little bit more. And then there's going to be potentially times where you pick up a little bit more. And that comes down to the part of knowing your client, knowing where they're at, keeping tabs on, you know, whether they're struggling or not. And then they will simply just respect you a little bit more in that position because they know that, you know, you've got their back, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you're in that position, I think, you know, Paul mentions, I think he wrote this in a post before, but when you're in a position where, you know, you are quite, I guess, you know, the word professional friend is good in this scenario. When you become a good friend with the client, they become comfortable with telling you things, you know, that ultimately are difficult to say. And when it comes down to that hard conversation, when if you think about when your best friend tells you, the truth or a hard truth, you listen and you take that information on. And that's the kind of position that we want to be in, where we can give them what they really need, right, in that scenario, and create the response that we really want from it.
Yeah. Is it a balancing act though? Is it a balancing act though? Because there's always that element of like, how many trainers you see where they're more friends with the clients, but they can't keep them accountable because they are friends with their clients, and they can't have those hard conversations. It's like trying to train your partner.
And that's why it's called professional friend, right? Because the professional is just as important as the friend.
Yeah.
And there's going to be times where, I guess see it as like a little bit of a dimmer switch almost. Friend is here. Sometimes this can push up a little bit more. This can go down a little bit more. Other times you're going to need to be, but you've got to have that relationship where you can still say, look, this is not good enough, or you need to do this a little bit more, obviously in a nice way.
Yeah.
But they still respect that and they still listen. But at the same time, you can still be like, hey,
this is where I think the online world is a little bit easier, because I think I always look at, like, of course, you want everyone on the online training to train really well, and sometimes you're helping them through their reps for training videos. And obviously, with your one-to-one clients, you're going to be periodizing long-term programs. You are looking to the future. But I think one-to-one training is very much the micro. It's where's your foot position on a split squat, and then you've got the online, which is literally like, right, let's plan your life for the next 6 years. And I think because of that, because you only see the data, you only see the overview of the week, rather you don't see the day-to-day struggles, you don't see the reps in the gym. It's easier you always have a target in mind, because you look at the data before you actually look at the person. Sometimes it's easy, like, I'll be friendly with you and I get to know you, but the first thing I see is like, right, where are we going? There's always a target. And I think when I look at a check-in with everyone now, it's like, I will be friendly with you, but the first thing I need to always think about is what you're paying me for. Settle that first, and in a supportive way, and reframe when they have negativity, but it always doubles back to that thing. Because I don't know if I came up with this sentence or I heard it from somebody, but I think it sticks with me when I ever feel I'm getting too friendly with a client, is that nothing will make a client dislike you more than feeling you've wasted their time and money. And that's the thing I always come back to.
Yeah, definitely, man. And then you've just got to wrap up the professionalism with a bit of humor, a bit of friendliness, and all of a sudden, what you're saying is like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're swearing at them or, cursing them, but then they're like, oh, it's all right. Tell me this.
Nice tone. Oh, you're such a prick. Like, you're just a little fat fuck. Don't say that. Like, do you think sometimes is there a too much with the touch points and accountability? Like, do you think at some point it takes away, not to get a copyright claim from Nathan, takes away from a client's autonomy when they're reliant on you to sort of keep them going? Because I'm assuming you've had bodybuilding coaches, right? You've had people who have coached you for shows, right? Have you had daily communication from any of them? I haven't. I get a check-in once a week, and I get my marching orders, and I go. I feel like when you work with let's say, for the use of a better term, the general population, the coaching is entirely different.
Do you know what? I have had some, I guess, daily communication with Jeff Alberts. So when I was, and this is what, this really helped me, to be honest. Usually a lot of people get daily communications as they reach the peak week, because it's a little bit more important. But actually, it came at a time where I was struggling the most with the nutrition and with adhering. And one of the things that he said was, look, just drop me a message, drop me a DM, just let me know kind of how your day's been. It doesn't have to be crazy long, but just a few lines to say, hey, you're all right. And we had daily communications for a little while, and I think that really helped. And to think, like, obviously, from 3DMJ, he's a busy coach, and he still had the time to kind of do that. That really added more trust that I had for that person. I think it's, again, like I said, the communication is really just about, giving the client as much help and support that they need in order for them to get to the end goal.
Yeah.
And if it is, if daily is needed for that person, then, maybe you do need to do that. But then there's going to be other clients who maybe rely on you a little bit too much. And then it comes down to the way that you respond. So let's say if they're saying to you, am I okay to eat this apple, kind of thing? And then, that's a typical one, right? And in the beginning, it's
no, fuck off. We've got work to do. That's fucking apple. I said pure carnivore.
In the beginning, it's okay to kind of say, hey, look, these are the macros, blah, blah, blah. But then maybe towards later. So one of the things that I get my clients to do is to maybe if they're going out for a social, they'll send me over their menu, and we'll run through, a strategy for their social. But as they progress through, the process and they get closer towards, the mid to the end result, I might start asking them the question back. So they might say, hey, is it, this is the menu, this is what I'm going, this is a scenario, what can I eat from the menu? And I say, I'll ask them, what's the purpose of this event? Is it a work event? Is it, I don't know, a celebration? Is it an anniversary? Those kind of things. Is it an important event to you? Like that's the main context, right? That's really important, first of all. And then it's, what do you think is the best option here? What do you think a good strategy is? And then that kind of promotes a little bit more autonomy. It promotes a little bit more self-sufficiency for that individual. And I like that way, because that way you're not saying, hey, don't speak to me. It's like, we're having a discussion here. We're working together to create and to figure out this solution. Because at some point you're going to need to be, a problem solver yourself. Right?
With that brings me on to another topic. It was just slightly on a tangent, but kind of falls into it. And it's talking like diet breaks, refeed days, maintenance days, things like this, right? It's something that I think we're both a fan of. It's a balancing act between, obviously, there's the physiological side to this, and there's obviously a mental side to this. And do you have a particular approach that you use when it comes to diet breaks and refeed days? Because I've had a lot. My last coach gave him whenever he made a change, just to probably soften the blow of taking food away from me and restock glycogen stores. I know people that periodize them, like Revive Strong, put up a great post about they literally have them fairly regularly, like every 4 to 6 weeks they will have one, and it's planned ahead with the client. I know Nathan is like, it's there as an option, take it when you need it. Do you have a certain approach to it, or is it totally unique?
Because
that could help the communication, right? Like someone's communication, if they feel that I've got a diet break in 3 weeks, they're probably more likely to be open in terms of communication rather than thinking this diet's like, it's hard, it's forever, and they just withdraw into themselves.
Yeah. I like to have, I guess it's really difficult, right? And I think the clarification of what this diet break really is really important. So is it really, like, are we diet breaking for the whole week? Are we, if a client is just going for a social and, their calories go up to maintenance for a day, is that considered a diet break? Or is that considered a refeed? And maybe maybe they're still in fat loss for that day. If they're going out for a social, they're just pulling back calories earlier in the day to create that deficit still. Like, I don't really put a name necessarily on it unless I am saying, hey, look, we are forcefully eating more food for a whole week. Then I'll say, okay, this is maintenance. Other than that, I'm not going to say, like, it's kind of like the principles of training, right? It doesn't matter what the fuck the name is.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. Like, you could call it RDL, a stiff leg deadlift, a straight arm bent over row if you really wanted to. But the truth of the matter is, like, what are you really doing in this scenario? And I think a lot of people put names on things like, refeeds, maintenance, cheat meals, whatever they want to call it. But you ultimately, potentially, you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, so, I suppose it depends on the client, how, like, in a way, how strong their psyche is, right? Like, I do like the idea of having that option. So for some people, having the option of a maintenance day that you can use when you're there, it's that sort of that putting that back on the client. Look, it's there if you need it. If you do it 4 times a week, you're probably not going to get very far very fast. But on the flip side of that, you've got some people that are just headstrong and proud that, that's there as an option. I'm never using it. I'm never tapping out. And some of those people, you kind of go, right, we're taking a refeed this Saturday, right? Yeah. Just to sort of get, because eventually you'll start to say, what, you on 1,300 calories and not losing weight? Okay, you stopped tracking accurately.
Mm.
And that's sort of how that brain, right?
I think there's a degree of self-sufficiency that comes into this as well. If you give them options, right, and they say, hey, okay, I'm going for this social, like what, again, the key is, what is the context of this social? Again, is it anniversary? Is it just like a work event? Are you just meeting up with mates that you see every single week? You know, how are you going to act in those scenarios? It's going to be very, very different, right? And it's important to, you know, have those scenarios so that then you can make the right choice. If you're seeing your mate every single week, then, you know, you're probably going to need a different, you know, a strategy for that. And then giving people the pros and the cons as well of this scenario. Like, okay, you can take a maintenance, or you can take, you know, whatever you want to call this day, a higher day, but this is what is going to happen. Are you cool with that? If you're cool with the end result of what occurs from that, then go ahead, take it. If you're not, okay, we've got to have a conversation about this. We've got to think about this, right? And create a relevant plan. And I think it's important to give people, you know, the pros and the cons, so that they are very aware of the expectations of what happens from that. Because what gets them upset is that they think that, okay, I'm going to do this thing, it's going to be okay, and then the end result isn't what they thought it would be, and then they get upset by that. And that's where you get the, oh, I'm not motivated, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's so important. And as regards to setting expectations, is the coaches that set good expectations tend to have easier processes. And it's that sort of thing. It's like, how do you put that on them? Like, if you know that this event's going to do X, Y, and Z, then it's your choice. I don't mind. It doesn't matter to me if you get in shape in 11 weeks or 13 weeks. You know, this is your journey. But as long as it's where anyone gets complaints, online or in person, is when they're going through the motion like, why didn't I get my results? It's like, well, you weren't doing the things. You didn't. It's your fault as a coach for not communicating the problems with those things. Like, when you onboard clients, because obviously expectation management, a lot of that happens at the start. Like, is there a way of approach that you go through onboarding clients to sort of minimize overwhelm, open up the lines of communication, and in turn set good expectations?
I guess onboarding wise, like I have a initial call with them. So that's key. We'll speak a lot about, you know, not just about the X's and O's of, okay, this is a nutrition plan. A lot of it is actually figuring out them and understanding them even more as a client, as how they live their life. Because everyone's going to say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. After the first week, you realize actually, you know, they're just saying yes to everything, right? And it's really important to say. And one of the big questions I always ask is, you know, they'll ask me, you know, how many times am I supposed to train? And really the question is, how many times can you train, right? And then they'll say 3 or 4 or something like that, right? And is it more 3 or is it more 4?
Yeah,
right. Because that's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And if they're doing, you know, right now, if they're going from no sessions or 2 sessions, like going to 4 potentially isn't realistic, right? There's a reason why you're doing 2 right now and not doing 4, right? So let's make this easier for you, and maybe we start off at 2 as well. And I forget where I'm going with this, but it's making sure that you kind of, again, like you said, meet them where they're at as well.
I think when you're looking at sort of those expectations, the other one I always have is try. I hate that word. To steal a phrase from Yoda, you know, like there's either do or do, no, do not. There is no try, and I hate it because it's such a non-committal thing, and I don't want to shit on that, but I often have like that thing. I was like, well, what do we have to do? How easy do we have to make this to change that try into I will?
And try and hope and all those.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, all those kind of. They're very. There's no depth to it.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I hope that my weekend is going to be better than last. Okay, cool. But hoping isn't going to get you anywhere. Like, what are your actions that is changing, you know, or bringing this hope into, you know, real life, right? That's the strategy, right? You don't just sit there and do the same thing as what you did last week and then go, oh my God, I hope that, you know, next week I'm going to be better. You know, that's just not happening, right?
The gym floor helped that a lot for me as well, because it's harder online to have that conversation sometimes. But in the gym floor, it was great because their negative self-talk that they have right now and those kind of words come into the gym floor, and you have genuine proof that they can overcome those things. I remember somewhere people get finished a set and they go, "That's too heavy," or I saw people in the middle of a set of pendulum squats to go, "I can't do this." I'm like, "What do you think you are doing?
Yeah.
Like the reps haven't slowed down yet. How is this too heavy? You've just got 15 reps." And like when you reinforce those on the gym floor, when someone comes into that, you can remind them like, "You said this about the leg press earlier. I don't buy it," you know. But online, it's like you don't have those reference points, so it's almost like you've got to scale that back and then build up from there. And that's the thing I still work with, because we know I'm being spoiled at a big gym facility where you've got the luxury of people paying a lot of money, so there's a bit more commitment. There's kitted out with the best equipment in the world. I think it optimal. You know, we work with Michael Gould from Integra, who isn't an optimal thinker. He's what you can do, but we look to perfect everything. And one of the biggest battles I always have for a client is like, am I jumping ahead here? Because I know I have a tendency to just go, right, cool. I see the potential in you. Let's rock and roll. And it's not always the case. And sometimes my mistake is sometimes I've jumped the gun and just gone further, and then I have to backtrack. But I should have just met them easier at the start.
But then there's also that fine line of, you know, these clients sometimes are ready to go. And, you know, you don't want to miss that opportunity either. So if they're kind of ready to go and, you know, they're ready to really push hard, you know, more recently I've been like, okay, cool, let's try it. You know, if you feel up for it, let's do that. And you can always scale that back a little bit later. But yeah, it's a really fine line between, you know, I'm trying to think, you know, ahead of time and say, okay, let's not push too hard so you get burnt out or whatever. But at the same time, sometimes that initial acceleration is really key to get the thing moving, right?
I also think sometimes as well, it's like sometimes tailoring your approach, knowing that people are going to tell you what you want to hear. This is why I quite like one thing, and I'm sure you got it, like UP are very big on the low to high calorie approach, right? And, you know, a lot of people end up low to low, but doing it right, it should be low to high. Like, if you know someone's going to say they're 110%, but you know they've never tracked their food before, and they're going to sneak in a thing here, they're going to forget about oils and lattes and sauces, you know, like if you run with that and kind of go, cool, we're going to push, and you get that buy-in and motivation, they're driven, they're going to be better than if we sort of said, well, let's look at your plan. So you've got a burger and chips here. Maybe have without the bun and sweet potato chips. I'm like, no one's excited by that. It's the same thing with setting goals, right? I see a lot of coaches at the moment that have set goals based off the fact that, well, the 30% body fat, 20 is realistic because we're all taught SMART, right? It's got a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic time frame. So this is how little I use that phrase now. But I was like, I'm not going to get up in the morning and go for a walk when it's raining based on getting from 20% to 15%. If I set the goal of 6%, I'm going to fucking move. And then if I want to be more realistic, okay, our goal is 6. Let's first get to 17. That is a totally different conversation than saying, well, what's the realistic thing that you can do? And then you say, well, let's set a goal of 5% down. No one ends up on your Instagram feed looking like with that 5% down, right? Let's shoot for the stars and then break that up into segments.
Sometimes, you know, a lot of my clients that do the shoots, they never, I'd say 90% of them don't come to me and say, hey, I want to do a shoot. They don't even say they want abs. They just say, you know, abs would be really cool. And, you know, I just want a flat stomach. That is the number one goal that I get from clients. I just want a flat stomach.
But do you think they actually do want abs, but they don't want to tell you because they know if they fail, it's put out there? So if you dig a bit deeper, often, I want abs. And when they start getting it, they're like, you know that ab thing you mentioned in day one? Actually, I kind of want it.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's the belief as well in themselves. Maybe, you know, a lot of times clients have done programs in the past, or they've tried dieting, or they've failed for like 20 odd years, and they've never achieved that or never even got close to that, right? So they're like, you know, I don't want to set this goal out. That's huge. Maybe it's not ever even possible for me. So they set their expectations a little bit lower so that it doesn't come crashing down. Yeah. And then when you actually start to pick up the momentum, you know, they realize, hey, this is possible. And then they have that belief, and things start to really pick up speed. I find with a lot of clients, it generally it's a slow start, but if they stick with it, you know, things start to really accelerate, and people actually get more and more accurate, and they get better and better. And I personally think that that's the way that how life is, right? You know, when you do something for the first time, you're not going to be best at it, but as you do it more often and you do it consistently and over and over and over and over, you get better.
It's like momentum, motivation, and competency, right? If I don't feel competent in something, if I feel like tracking my food, I'm going to make a mistake, or I'm going to look a bit stupid in the gym, I go in with caution, hesitation. But when you start seeing results and you get a bit of competency, it's like, yeah, I can do this. And then you've also got the momentum, and it sort of goes a little bit hand in hand. Like, you say like it's a slow start, but people often tend to pick up. Now, one of the big things a lot of coaches will face is the motivation dip. Halfway through, client's going to go, I always call it the 10 kilo syndrome, right? The first people, they lose the first 10 kilos and they go from, I hate how I look, to, I look fine, but that's a lot of work. And that's often that middle ground where they're not where they want to be, but they've gotten a bit complacent and things start to slip. This is where I thought photo shoots with Simon Howard in London, where you had them every month. And it was like, cool, this client's going to book onto October, this in December. Because when they get complacent, you give them that deadline. But that's not always possible. So what do you do in those moments when that client's kind of lost the first bit and you just sort of get a bit stagnant?
I think that then comes down to, you know, you picking that up and then asking them, right, and communicating and saying, look, this is what's happening. Like, are you happy with your goal? Like, do you want to get leaner, or are you just initial goal was I want to get abs and I want to get really, really lean? But now you might actually realize doing it that I'm really happy here and this is my sweet spot. And maybe they're just actually afraid of saying to you, hey, I'm really happy here, you know, and this is where I just want to be. And this was everything that I asked for. And I think you as a trainer, you have to pick that up and say, cool, you know, are you really happy here? Is this really what you want to achieve? And if you do, that is perfectly okay. Let's work on a new goal. Let's now swap you. Let's not stop grinding you on lower calories. Let's bring your calories up to maintenance and teach you how to live comfortably here. Add in those socials so you don't feel guilty. And, you know, we create that environment that now this is the rest of your life that you can live, or move you into a building phase if that's really what you want to do. But I think the number one thing is if you keep grinding people and trying to push them towards this goal and their actions are not showing you, you know, what they actually want to do, then, you know, is that really the goal that they want to achieve? And sometimes you have to, again, dig a little bit deeper and figure that out and just reset.
Yeah. I think that's the important thing, but I think that's where a lot of coaches get sort of like frustrated, myself included at times. You've got clients that they often tell you that's what they want. And then you're like, well, there is no actions that I'm seeing that suggest this is actually true. And like sometimes it's a challenge sometimes of like trying to get you've either got to convince them to do it, or you've got to convince them to kind of give up on it. And as you say, it comes back to sort of how you word that. It's like, if you are happy here, it is fine. You don't need to impress anyone or prove anything to anyone. There's other priorities in life, but just let me know. Yeah.
And I flip that as well. Like if they eventually say, hey, you know, no, I really do want to lose fat. You know, I say, well, you have to convince me that you want to lose fat, because right now it looks more like you just want to maintain and you want to, you know, and that adds ownership, that, you know, gives a responsibility back on that individual to say, actually, yeah, you know, maybe I haven't been, you know, doing, and you've got to catch these things early. And I think it comes with experience to know, you know, when is the right time to push, and also when is the right time to pull back, right?
So to ask you a couple of closing questions before I let you get on with your day, I know you've just moved into a new house and you've probably got loads of stuff to do and set up. What is the top 3 things in your mind, and obviously we've covered probably all of them already, reasons why trainers don't get the results they want with their clients?
Are we going with aside from the lack of knowledge and emotional bias, right? Because I feel like these things are kind of like a given. Like you're not going to get results if you don't understand, obviously, the basics of energy balance. And if you have an emotional bias that everyone should train a certain way or do squats.
Yeah.
You know, so outside of that, right?
Yeah, I guess let's go outside of that. Although that second one could be a topic in itself, because, you know, especially when we've gone down the wormhole that we do every Tuesday night in terms of like, I said this in the assessment chat the other day. For people who don't know, we you know, me and him are on a group of like a mentorship with a guy called Michael Gould from Integra, talking about exercise mechanics programming, and we've gone through assessments. And I was, even until relatively recently, until I saw Michael, I tell you what, the downside of exercise mechanics is that I miss ignorance of like, I'm just going to go in a squat and like tear shit up. And now it's like, oh, that feels bad. That feels bad. That's unstable. My femur's a bit too long. Oh, you know, my HRV's low. I'm like, Jesus Christ, Simon, just fucking lift.
Yeah. So, I guess, outside of that, I think like we said, failure to understand the client and speak to them in a way that gets them to take action. I think, you know, we're all so different, you know, different strokes for different folks. And you need to really understand your client to be able to speak to them in a way or say the right thing at the right time to get them to take action. So I think that's really important. Like, don't start speaking resistance profiles if it's like Shilpa, vegan mum of 4, right?
Squeeze your Kevin Major.
But at the same time, like, don't hold yourself back if your client is someone who is really interested in learning that stuff too.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's really important. Laziness. So, you know, not caring for the client. So you have to want it more than the client does. It seems very strange to want a client's goals more, but, you know, I take all my clients' goals like to heart, and if they don't get it, you know, I'm constantly like racking my head and racking my brain. I'm thinking, you know, what can I do here? You know, how can I improve to get this person to do what I need them to do? And every time, and not every communication that you have with your client is going to be a success and allow you to get them to do what you want. But you need to then reassess the way that maybe you said something. Is like, oh, could I have said it a little bit better? Could I have, you know, use something else to help to spur the moment on, or try a different method? You know, you have to continuously, you know, keep trying. And I think that's something that Mark Coles always says as well. Like, you have to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. You can't give up. You know, if you give up, then your client's going to sense that, right? But generally, if you keep trying, I think your client is going to sense that effort from you, and a lot of times they're going to level up alongside you.
Yeah.
So,
to finish off as a closing question before finding out where people can find you, what is the biggest thing in your mind that sets apart the clients who get incredible results to those that don't?
I'm going to use a quote from Phil Lerney that he said, I don't know, 10 years ago, but it's just simply consistency and inconsistency. I think, like, everybody has consistency, you know, whether it's for, you know, a day, whether it's for 2 weeks, whether it's for, you know, a month or even a year. They're all varying different lengths of consistency, but you have to be, that consistency has to be in line with the result that you want. So the more intense that your goal is, the bigger that your goal is, the longer and more consistent that you need to be. So if I wanted to just get better at playing, you know, a kickabout in the park with my mates, maybe I don't need to practice football at all, right? But if I want to be as good as David Beckham, I'm probably going to have to, you know, train twice a day, you know, play football very, very frequently, and I probably still won't get there. But, you know, I'm going to be better than what I was before, and I'll be closer there than if I just had a kickabout with my mates, right? So, you know, the same, if you have massive goals and you know that I need to lose 30, maybe even 40 kilos to get to my goal, I'm going to have to be consistent for a lot longer, you know? But if my goal is, I just want to get a little bit, you know, leaner, I just want to lose 2 kilos, then you probably can get away with being not as consistent, right?
I love that.
It's dependent on the intensity of your goal.
I absolutely love that. I love that. So for people that want to know more about you, see these incredible results that you get with your clients, and maybe even work with you, where do people find you?
They will eventually be able to find me on gymwithhim.com, just refurbing my website. But if they really need to find me, at gymwithhim on Instagram, or you can email me at gymwithhim@gmail.com.
Awesome, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'll catch you on Tuesday, I suppose.
Yes, catch you on Tuesday. Lovely to speak to you, man. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, mate.
Guys, thank you very much for watching the podcast. If you're like me and like to binge watch podcast episodes, click here for our most recent episode. And if you enjoy the show and want to be updated when new videos come live, click here to subscribe to the channel.